start off by telling us, our listeners, a little bit about the very special project that you're involved with at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to be screening a series of 8 films the 27th of April as part of Melbourne Knowledge Week. And the 8 films are essentially a series of films about working on the front line of healthcare during COVID-19. And I guess it's quite a raw and intimate glimpse into the healthcare workers' universe beyond the hospital doors. I'm a filmmaker myself, and I work for the University of Melbourne. And over lockdown, the first week, pretty much when we went into lockdown in March, April, I was hearing stories of a lot of my filmmaker friends losing work. You know, just within that week, so many jobs got cancelled. And at the same time, I was speaking with healthcare workers about their experiences of working on the front line as part of a project I was working on at the university, and hearing that there was all these, really important stories that still needed to be told. So this series of films essentially is a collaboration between a filmmaker or a healthcare worker who's being affected by COVID-19 and a filmmaker who's in isolation because of it, so both being affected in really different ways.
Yeah, now I've had the chance to watch a couple of these films and they are very powerful, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of the filmmakers who are involved with this project, but also how you went about hand selecting each of those filmmakers.
Yeah, sure. So the filmmakers, we've got 8 filmmakers, and I'll say who the filmmakers are. So there's Michael Gupta, Chiara Malera, Alice Stevens, Kalu Uji, Ryan Alexander Lloyd, Garathan Vidyapathy, Varun Chatterjee, and Naomi Mendoza. And Naomi's actually also one of the producers on the Respond series, a creative producer. So she really played an instrumental role in, sort of curating a group of really diverse, upcoming, talented filmmakers to tell these stories. In terms of the filmmakers themselves and how we went about selecting them, we definitely wanted it to be representative, I guess, in terms of having people from diverse cultural backgrounds, having people, who can bring a unique lens to the story, and obviously, a mixture of just different people with different views on the world that can kind of bring something interesting to the series of films.
So how important was it for you for the filmmakers to be able to tell their story as well? Because there was such a misconception in the media here in Australia when everyone went into lockdown. A lot of people had the illusion that filmmakers were still working because we were seeing Matt Damon arrive in New South Wales and George Clooney arrive and to do films. And it was such a misconception because I know many filmmakers here in Melbourne that lost their jobs during that time. So how important was it for you, for those filmmakers, to be able to tell their COVID story as well?
Yeah, so I think, in terms of this particular series of films, it's very much centred around the healthcare workers' experience. But I think just in terms of the visual imagery, that's really where the filmmaker has their own fingerprint. And the fact that the filmmaker, was restricted by all of the... it was filmed during different stages of lockdown. So each film was filmed at different stages of lockdown. So, each filmmaker brings their own fingerprint to it, but also the restrictions of lockdown and working creatively within those restrictions. So Alice Stevens, for example, was representing a female healthcare worker, and she got her sister and her mother, and because she had contact with them and was able to have contact with them at the time that she shot her film. So she used them in her film to sort of represent women at different stages of their life.
Yep.
So she was able to sort of bring that, I suppose her unique experience of lockdown and bring that visually to the story. But of course, the words that we're hearing are all the healthcare workers' experience.
Yeah.
So it was quite collaborative in that way, I think.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Did the producers kind of pair up filmmakers with healthcare workers, or did the filmmakers have to go out and find their own healthcare workers to tell their story?
Yeah, so actually, the Respond film series was originally created for RM Hive, which is an app which supports the mental health and wellbeing of frontline healthcare workers. It's currently just rolled out at Royal Melbourne Hospital, but the plan is to roll it out, further. So at the start of the pandemic, there was a healthcare worker, Luke Birchall, who wanted to support the wellbeing of his colleagues, essentially. And a lot of healthcare workers, especially on the front line, are exposed to traumatic events regularly. So COVID-19 is just one example, really. And we kind of learned that there's very few resources tailored to their needs because there's this sort of ongoing stigma around the subject of mental health and healthcare. So in order to create this app, Luke engaged a research team at the University of Melbourne to use photo interviewing to gain insights into the healthcare workers' experience. So that would be where a healthcare worker brings a photo, they choose what they want to share, and they talk to that photo about their experiences, around, I suppose, their experience of working on the front line, but also how they disconnect from work and after a really busy and stressful day. And so the research team recorded that audio, and that audio and some of the photos were then passed on to the filmmakers. So it was kind of a collision of art and science, if you like, because, in part it was a research project into the experiences of healthcare workers so we could better support them through an application that was being developed. But also we use that in a creative way to be able to then share those stories. For healthcare workers to be able to share those stories with each other, because that's important, to be able to share, like, okay, this is how I tend to disconnect from work. I find running helps, I find meditation, whatever. But also to be able to share these personal stories with the wider public, which is what we're doing with the screening, to be able to kind of share what that experience, especially at the start of the pandemic, was like. That sort of fear and not knowing what was going to happen, seeing what was happening overseas, and this sort of this feeling of kind of impending doom, if you like, was definitely what was coming across. But then also the incredible ways in which healthcare workers were able to kind of deal with that. So
yeah, and
inspiring.
You've got the very special screening of this, of course, as part of Melbourne Knowledge Week, and Libby Gore will be involved with that as well. How will our listeners be able to head along to that screening to check out these films? And if they can't make that screening, will there be a way for them to watch these films later on?
Yeah, so the screening will happen on the 27th of April at the State Library Conversation Quarter. So this is actually, I've never actually been there before, but it's a huge space. So there's 300 seats and a huge big screen, and we're really excited about the real world experience and being able to screen these films in a real world environment, because they're so cinematic. That's the other thing. There's a lot of Zoom stuff and mobile phone stuff produced over lockdown, but these are really cinematic films, so we're really happy to have them on the big screen. If people want to come along to that, we would definitely love to see you there. If you go to the Melbourne Knowledge Week website, you can search Respond, which is the name of the film series, and you'll be able to find our event page. And yeah, afterwards, as you just mentioned, Libby Gore is going to be hosting a Q&A with a couple of the filmmakers and healthcare workers involved in making the film. So that will be really exciting to kind of bring everyone together in the real world. It will be the first time. And then if people want to watch the film after the event, there will be a way, but we're just sort of working through the details of what that will look like. So watch this space. There'll also be at the Melbourne Knowledge Week Meat Market Festival Hub a booth where you can go in at any point during the festival and actually watch the films. So awesome. That's another option. If you can't make it on the 27th of April.
And for all our listeners out there, we will actually put a link to the event page for the screenings, but also where you'll be able to watch those films as well during Knowledge Week. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us on our show today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I know for myself, I can't wait to head along and check out the other films, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for chatting.
No problem. I'll let you go. Have a great day. But yeah, as soon as you find out the